the fantasy MVP of the first half of the season. Is that more this week on the couch? Joined by Derek, Brown, D-Bro, all of our bro. Who's the MVP halfway through the NFL season?
I kind of lean to the full Christian McCaffrey, man. Like, who's been more stable? I was writing him up actually today for the primer, and it's like, it is absolutely ridiculous because when you see the weekly volatility with wide receivers, this man has been an RB1 in every single game except for the game when they play the Browns, which, he was RB15 that week. So I don't want to sound like I'm giving the chalk answer here, Sig, but I think it's got to be CMC, right?
I think so. I mean, the problem is other players have had MVP-like stretches, but not been sustained. And like you said, it's the position. I love that you brought up the primer. We're going to talk about the primer a lot. Make sure that's part of your weekly appointment reading, everybody, over at Fantasy Pros. But when you're going through, because, in a typical week, Derek, I will review everything that happened and write that up. Upgrades, downgrades, kind of overview what happened this week. And then I will do projections. I'll do my tiers. I'll do my sleepers. I'll do buy low, sell high, talking about players whose values might change. But you pretty much touch every team every week, right? You every week you go back over everything. And it really gives you a sense of how valuable Christian McCaffrey's consistency has been, because running back has just been an absolute just a bloodbath, carnage. I mean, who's the other success story? Raheem Mostert, I guess. Kyron Williams for a little while.
Travis Etienne.
Travis Etienne is probably one of the biggest hits. Yeah, and you might say if you want to make this a fun debate, Derek, you would say, well, because Travis Etienne cost a 4th round pick, maybe a 3rd round pick, if you were smart. And I'll say that if you took Travis Etienne in the 3rd round, I probably would not have said you were smart. So that makes me smart.
Same. I was going to say, I will absolutely own the L on that. I was not in on Etienne. I was more worried about Tank Bigsby carving into a role.
And my theme this week is kind of first half report card. We have a pause here. The NFL is 18 weeks, so it's like a golf course. We're at the turn. We're doing the back 9 now, and I agree with you that I overrated Tank Bigsby. What we did not overrate, I think, was the Jags coach's willingness to make Tank Bigsby a big enough part of the offense that it would have. I mean, Bigsby had the first 2 rushing touchdowns, right? And then how many? Yep. I think Etienne had 6 in the last 3 weeks going into the bye. Imagine if Bigsby had performed better and 4 of those were Bigsby touchdowns, and Bigsby was getting 10, 12, 15 touches a game. Everything pointed towards them being open to that if he was able to seize that opportunity. And I think it's a good case to point out that a divide between the analysis that says this is the opportunity this player is going to get, but maybe the more important analysis is what can that player do with that? And alternatively, players who weren't even supposed to get opportunities can sometimes just force their way through the door. Like, this is going to be interesting to see with Khalil Shakir, for instance. That wasn't the plan. A 1 tight end offense with Shakir on the field like 70% of the time, but it may become the plan. So I like that. And McCaffrey, of course, like you said, the running back amongst the wide receivers. And the other part, looking back, was, well, Elijah Mitchell was going to get 10 carries a game like he did last year, right? Yep. So that was something else that helped you sneak in and get McCaffrey at a pick other than the first pick, which is what he would probably be if we were doing fantasy drafts today. It's Wednesday. We just spend a lot of time doing the waiver wire. Waiver wire is really a perfect fantasy football feature because you have to look back at what just happened and project what the implications of it in the short and long-term future are. So you're combining both time dimensions here. Let's talk about who I think should have been the darling of the waiver wire this week, Keaton Mitchell.
Ooh, okay.
Are you probably going to be more aggressive on Keaton Mitchell than the industry consensus would be? About the same? For instance, if somebody's been sitting on number 1 waiver wire priority, or if you got the hammer, like I've got 70% of my budget left, nobody else has more than 50%. So I could easily bid 40, 50% on someone and I can take that player. Do you use that kind of move to get Keaton Mitchell? Or even on the other side, you're saying, yeah, this is fool's gold. Look at your little McLaughlin. Same kind of player, same kind of role. Yeah, that's what you're going to get.
So I brought this up on the Fantasy Pros podcast, and we ran through waivers, and I was like, look, man, like I feel like I'm the wet blanket on Keaton Mitchell, because if the game script had gone differently, Ravens versus Seattle, and they didn't blow the doors off that team, would we even seen Keaton Mitchell play? Like more than maybe like a handful of snaps, maybe more special team stuff, things like that. Like, because he only played 14 snaps. Now he looked amazing on the 14 snaps he got, and former yesteryear Justin Forsett memories start coming to mind, and you're like, oh, look at this,
yeah.
And it tickles the fancy. But if that game script would have gone differently, would we have just seen more Gus Edwards? Would we have seen more Justice Hill? So I don't want to say that I'm totally out on Keaton Mitchell. Like, I think that bidding for him and that level of aggression, depending on how much fab you have, and also weighing that type of bid versus the fab amount at this point of the season, how much fab do other teams in your league have too?
Right.
So making a measured bet on Keaton Mitchell, I think, is where I stand, to where if I don't have a lot of fab, I'm not blowing the entire clip. Because the other guy that I brought up on the show earlier this week was, and I understand if he's not out there in a lot of different leagues, but if he is out there, I'm more willing to press the aggression button hard on Pop Douglas and looking at what his role looks like going down the stretch, because we have a New England Patriots offense that, while it has not been pretty, Sig, and I'm not going to tell anybody that it's been pretty, it hasn't. This is also an offensive environment that can breed passing volume. And if Pop Douglas can gather all of that, and he's already shown the ability to earn targets. The guy's had over a 20% target share in numerous outings. 1 week he had 24%. The other people that are around him in that offense are not high-end target earners at this stages of their career. Juju Smith-Schuster is not even a full-time player.
Right.
So if I'm going to press the aggression button, it's for Demario Douglas in this sense, because I buried the lead here. New England has quietly been a top 10 passing rate and paced offense in neutral scripts for the entire season. The fact that they've been so bad up to this point has kind of buried that underneath the sand. But I'm over here with the tiny pail, and I'm just trying to dig it out and let people see, like, look, this is nice. Like, we could get volume here. So if I'm going to be aggressive on one person, it's not Keaton Mitchell, it's Pop Douglas.
Yeah, I like that. And on Mitchell, I just think that the one out, there is an out, is just that the Ravens offense, which, let's face it, not really until the Detroit game, I think, did we see this passing game look like it was gelling, where it looked like, and it's getting healthier.
Yep.
On top of that, Rashad Bateman looks better. Odell Beckham looks better. So you have that starting to click. Gus Edwards has got the bull in the china shop downhill. You can't necessarily go light boxes, right?
Agreed.
Lamar Jackson's making you play 11 on 11 football. So now you have another player whose attention is divided, and then a defensive coordinator whose attention is divided. And now you add a player with the quickness and speed of Keaton Mitchell. And I wonder if it's just one of those things that, and again, there's an intention, and then there's players changing the intention by how they perform.
Agreed.
Keaton Mitchell does this again. So I think it's possible that Keaton Mitchell could be that. I mean, hello, Devin Achane, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's possible. That's absolutely possible. It is possible.
I hope that we're in
age.
Over. I do hope. And what's funny is, and it doesn't even have to be take over, because Devin Achane never took over the Miami backfield.
No, but I mean, like Thunder and Lightning, could we get that out of Baltimore? It definitely, we could get that.
Absolutely. Well, when I like the idea of this, whether it's Achane or Keaton Mitchell or Jaleel McLaughlin, who we will talk about more in the future. Sean Payton's going to try to get Javonte Williams 300 carries in the second half of the season. So maybe not this year. But
Samaje Perine has done nothing to hold that RB2 job. And we've seen Sean Payton has operated with those mixed backfields for numerous seasons. That's what made me so interested, not only outside of the efficiency stuff for McLaughlin, but we've seen Sean Payton say, okay, here's the narratives. We can't use small running backs, all this other kind of stuff. I don't care about that. Sean Payton has already shown us time and time again, he does not care about that. Darren Sproles is the easiest example of this. Yeah, Reggie Bush. the easiest examples of this that we have in yesteryears of fantasy production where we can point to, and then you throw his efficiency on top of that, and it's like Samaje Perine. Like, would I be surprised if he goes to the bench and he's never heard from again, and this is Javonte and Jaleel going down the stretch? No, not at all.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be the case. Although, as Cecil has pointed out, if something happens to Williams, he's just said, and poor Cecil, it is an interesting era we're in now in football media, Derek, because he has to say, I wouldn't tell you anything about what happened at practice.
Yeah.
But if I were, I might tell you. And he just says McLaughlin is the number 2 running back. And it means in all cases, he will be the number 2 running back. So you're not going to see him truly become a lead back. But we're getting sidetracked on McLaughlin, although I do think the larger point here that I'm trying to make is I do hope, Derek, that we're entering an era of football and fantasy football where 180-pound running backs can be studs, and not just by being Austin Eckler or Christian McCaffrey and catching 100 balls, but because they're game breakers, because the field is spread out more, because there's more 11-on-11 football, and I hope that works out. But I want to talk about Pop Douglas, like you said. That's a good one. It's the struggle target, right? We've already had Adam Thielen take a good run at being the league winner, the fantasy MVP.
Agreed.
As the struggle target after Andy Dalton showed him the way. Rachaad White, in a way, was surviving as a struggle target in the passing game until this game last week with Tampa. Alvin Kamara, the struggle target of all struggle targets for a little while. Although these cases show us, not in Carolina's case, but certainly in the case of Tampa, at least for a week, and the Saints, that these offenses can get over themselves so that a player with struggle target value, that value evaporates. But I don't think New England's going to be that offense. I don't think we're going to see New England turn the corner. So yeah, Pop Douglas can actually uncover. And like you said, Mac Jones throws a lot, and they're going to have to throw a lot. Their defense lost the best 2 players like right off the bat.
And JC Jackson's not showing up for meetings. Not that he's played well since he's been in New England, but I mean, that defense is, I'm not going to say it's on life support because their the other part of that, their run defense is extremely good, but their secondary is struggling. So they're going to allow points.
Yeah, they are. They're going to be playing. We're talking about these teams, Carolina, New England. These are some fantastic specimen of football teams that you will get to watch on Island games this week, Chicago and Carolina, Indy and New England. And I did want to mention, I'll tee this one up for you because I know we're also talking about players to buy or sell. Or really, what we're always talking about is if you think of the arc or graph of a player's value, where is it headed? How can we get out ahead of it? And one player that I'm real fascinated with is Jonathan Taylor. Ooh. And so here's the thing, Derek. If we were doing draft rankings for today, like you're going to draft a fantasy league, right? That just plays out from week 9 to week 17. Okay. What's Taylor? Is he running back 2?
He's definitely in the conversation for the top 3. I think the only player that I would definitively take over him is Christian McCaffrey, but I think him and Travis Etienne and Jonathan Taylor are all sitting on the same island.
Yeah,
like they're sharing the same park bench, I think.
Right. You mean Jacobs and Etienne and Taylor together? Those 3.
Oh, well, and CMC's in that conversation too. Right. So I guess 4.
So Jake, right, but Jacobs is arguably a top 3 back. Etienne's arguably a top 3 back, and Taylor is. But I don't know if Taylor's being valued that way in the high.
He's not. I don't think he is, and
I don't think he is. So this is an example. I always bring up buy low, sell high. This is an example of a buy high, and I say again and again, buy low, sell high. That's yesterday. You can't do that anymore. Information is too good and spread out. What you can do is buy high and sell low, where you can get out of players that are falling knives, where people are going to try to get a bargain, and you can try to buy players that people think, well, maybe this is a sell high moment for this player. And I do think that Jonathan Taylor he'd be a first round pick in a lot of drafts. And
agreed.
The other thing about that is, I know you said New England's run defense is good, and it is, but in any game that the Colts are, what I saw last week was that in any game where the Colts it's competitive, he's going to touch the ball 25 times.
Agreed.
It's just like, and he didn't play for the first 4 weeks. He
doesn't the slow. I think we need to also hit on this is the slow ramp up is complete. Like he played 76% of the snaps last week. He had almost a 70% route per dropback rate. Like that ramp up is done. He is
Yep.
a bell cow, as close as we get to being a bell cow right now in today's NFL.
Yeah, he's ready to take off, I think, because if you look at the schedule, after this game in Germany, you get a bye. And I mean, I know these are tough run defenses, but he's so much fresher than these defenses. Tampa, Tennessee, the Cincinnati game is interesting. Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Vegas, Atlanta and Vegas in week 16 and 17. So I just feel like Taylor is a player that I would at least be trying to lay the groundwork for a trade, especially with his bye next week. The team is, going into this week, they're 5-4. They are in a situation where they might need to win every game to get into the playoffs. You never know. So I like that. So let me ask you this, because you're looking at your rankings. So give us the picture at running back after that, right? I mean, that's the thing. There it is. There's the picture,
ugly
right?
fast.
Right. What's the picture? No. So what's just tell me what's on what you're looking at after you get past that top four.
It's Breece Hall, it's Bijan, it's Eckler, who's not even fully healthy. It's Javonte, Derrick Henry. Like it gets ugly and dicey quickly, Sig.
Yeah.
Like where you're like, do I buy into this offense? Do I buy into health? Do I buy into Arthur Smith? Do I buy into the Jets offense and Zach Wilson? And I know Breece Hall has been immune to those different things up until the last 2 weeks, where we have seen he's not, because if he hasn't, broken a long one in the passing game, he hasn't been able to do much in the run game because teams can just stack the boxes. They don't respect Zach Wilson, and they shouldn't. So it's rough. And then you have, at RB, and I bumped him down a lot last week, but Alvin Kamara is in that conversation too. Sure. But his snaps got cut last week. So I don't know, because the thing that I think is the great wilderness, it's the part where it gets scary out here, is us trying to divide and figure out how healthy players are at this point of the season, because we can't really trust a lot of the injury reporting. Like, that's all. It's grain of salt, man. Like, you have teams play these games with the injury report. So like Alvin Kamara snaps going to like below 50%. All of a sudden, is that health related? You have in previous weeks, and I wrote this up in the primer, it was like the Denver Broncos, when we were questioning Javonte Williams one of those weeks, and they were like, but he practiced in full on Friday. But then Javonte has quoted to the media as saying, I didn't practice in full all week. But if you go by the injury report, you'd be like, oh, okay. So it gets messy and it gets crazy very quickly once you get past the top three, the top five running backs right now. We didn't even talk about Kenneth Walker and then Zach Charbonnet taking the snaps in the last 2 weeks, and what Seattle's doing. They're a perfect example. I mean, all of us can say Kenneth Walker is probably not anywhere close to fully healthy with the calf. The snap rates over the last 2 weeks versus the rest of the season tell that picture, and we don't even have to look at injury reports, even though Seattle doesn't even list him on the injury report right now.
Yeah, Seattle's an interesting team offense to look at, because you had the comment already, Gino needs to stop turning the ball over so much, something to that effect, right? So, I mean, that's now you're one step out on the plank, right? And they like Drew Lock. They believe in Drew Lock more than any of us do. Interesting stuff potentially afoot. But let's see, this week against Washington's a really good litmus test. If Gino isn't effective against Washington without their top 2 pass rushers, then there is a valid, rational argument to ask who's the backup and should they get a chance, no matter who it is. So, and you have Jackson Smith and Jigba turning this potentially into a 3 wide receiver offense. In fantasy terms, what we really care about, which means you got 3 boom bust wide receiver, 3 flex plays, basically. And then, like you mentioned, Charbonnet coming on. And what I was going to say was, after Keaton Mitchell on the waiver wire this week, you're hoping for Elijah Mitchell or Zach Charbonnet. We're at that phase where you just have some backups, Charbonnet's been getting more snaps than Walker, to your point, but Walker would need to miss time for him to be someone we would trust in our lineup, which leads back again around to these part-time running backs. Maybe that's why part-time running backs can matter so much. So, and going back to our original, Jonathan Taylor, see if the person, here's just I'm going to make an over broad take here, Derek, that I think actually it is, I'm willing to stand behind. Like, don't trade running back value right now. Don't trade it. No, don't trade it. I don't care if you've been flexing Derrick Henry. Don't. If you took if you went if you started your draft with McCaffrey and then you took Henry in the third and Etienne in the fourth, you're like, I'm flexing Henry and I have on my bench, whoever, I've got Deontay Johnson. I want to put him in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't trade your running back value right now because of what we're talking about, because it is tough out there. You're rubbing two sticks together. So, go ahead.
It's gotten ugly very, very quickly, Sig. And I think that you pointing out Jonathan Taylor as being a great buy high, or even if people are not, because I think he's a buy high, but not high enough as he should be. But you could toss Austin Eckler, and if anybody's already looked at his fantasy playoff schedule, I think it's within the realm of possibility you could trade for both of those running backs, depending on your depth and things like that, or at least one of the two. And both of those guys could be carrying teams to fantasy championships. Like Austin Eckler's playoff schedule is just the stuff of dreams. Like, where you wake up and you're like, oh, is this real?
Denver, Vegas, and Buffalo.
Gosh.
Yes.
It's insanity. And so right now, you even be trading for Austin Eckler, not even worried about like, yes, okay, is he going to give me top 20 production, top 15 production right now? Okay, sure. Even in the worst iterations of the Chargers offense, it's probably going to happen. But you're trading for him for the stretch run and the fact that he can win you weeks with that type of schedule. So it's gotten really bad for running back. Can we go off the beaten path here for a second?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
You brought up a fantastic point about running backs and size and stuff. With the future of the NFL and those players getting more of a run or being explosive, and we kind of taking the shovel out and burying these old narratives of, and the narratives are they're out there for a reason, because there is substance behind running back size and usage in the NFL. But can we already, like, we're waiting to carve the tombstone for the running backs. Can we already say that the size narrative for wide receivers is dead? Can we put that to bed? Like, Tank Dell's already shown that's not a thing. Devontae Smith, numerous wide receivers, Pop Douglas, like these guys that not only like, and I mentioned a few different guys that play the slot mostly, but Tank Dell is a primary outside wide receiver. Can we also bury the narrative of wide receiver size? Can we just just carve the tombstone, put it out to left field and say, forget about it. Bye. You're dead. You're done. I think we're at that point, right?
Yeah. And in the typical fashion, Derek, this is one of I'm old now. I'm 48 years old.
I'm not exactly young either. So you're in good company here, Sig.
It's fun to have lean in to becoming an old man. Old man shakes fist at cloud. And the cloud I'm going to shake my fist at is that the NFL doesn't know what they're doing. And there are bad organizations. There are definitely organizations.
There are.
Okay. That don't know what they're doing. But there's enough organizations that anything that we in our fantasy community here are like, oh, Eureka, we've discovered something. We haven't discovered anything. The NFL was probably talking about it 10 years ago. But in a timely fashion, to your point, let's look at the 4 first-round draft pick wide receivers this year. Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? Jordan Addison, and then Quinn Johnston. And what's going to be funny is early indication. So if there's a bust out of the 4, it's probably going to be Johnston. And Johnston's that classic size, speed. We can mold him into something amazing, different than what he is right now, right? Addison, Flowers, Smith, and Jigba, you're asking them to come in and just continue the trajectory of their development. And Johnson, I think, represents old wide receiver scouting. The type of wide receiver, Jonathan Baldwin, the type of wide receivers that teams would reach for because they think
DK Metcalf corollary, where it's like, you're big, you're fast. Can you play X? What can we do with you? And what can you be? Not what are you at this stage, but what can you turn into possibly?
Yeah. And Metcalf and I'm assuming you're citing Metcalf as a positive case.
Positive case.
And the Seahawks looked at what he could do and said, that's fine. We don't need the whole route tree. You're so dominant on the parts of the route tree that you're good at, and we can use that. But I think the NFL is right there on the idea that 180-pound wide receivers are fine. 180-pound wide receivers. And look, Cooper Kupp was kind of the shot across the bow for fantasy football, that it doesn't have to be AJ Green, Julio Jones, that, even a guy like going back to Terrell Owens, but then history's repeating itself, because before that it was Marvin Harrison, and look who's going to be the first wide receiver off of the board. in 2024.
Well, I was also told that Puka Nacua could never succeed because he was unathletic too. So we have that also.
Right, scheme matters. So lots of interesting stuff here. I love that you mentioned the schedule, and I love that you mentioned looking ahead. Everybody should be doing that in our classic redraft leagues. I think that this is smart, right? I think, first of all, I'll put out there as this is my sort of hypothesis, okay? You actually can kind of make sense out of the ups and downs of Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins. You know, it's not like, you know, CJ Stroud's an interesting case. We have to talk about him because, like, I'm contractually obligated to mention CJ Stroud and Joshua Dobbs because both of those stories were just amazing. Like, you watch football every week, so you can witness things like that. It's better than any fantasy win or anything. Just getting the contact high off of that kind of transcendence that we saw there. But CJ Stroud just got shut down by the Carolina Panthers. What? Anyway, if you look at Miami, it's pretty easy to see that against good defenses, the timing gets thrown off, and it's kind of like Peyton Manning. Once you move Peyton Manning's feet, like, oh, you can't beat Peyton Manning. Well, no, you just have to make him move his feet, and then everything would get thrown off. But if he didn't have to move his feet, chances are you were going to be groaning at watching the team go up and down the field against your favorite team's defense. Miami, I think timing is really important for this offense. So against a Denver, right, against some of these inferior defenses, you know, the Giants and so on, the Chargers, against good defenses, Kansas City this past week, for instance. So you see where I'm going with this. If you looked at the playoff schedule, you want to tell the folks out there who they're going to play during weeks 15, 16, and 17.
It's not great, Sig. They have starting. I think this conversation actually starts. If we want to start it as early as week 14, because Tennessee's secondary is playing a little bit better. They're not allowing a lot of passing touchdowns. Very much a bend but do not break defense. So even if you want to toss Tennessee into that, and they want to drag you down in the muck with Derrick Henry and running and slowing the game down. So that starts off the schedule at 14. So then they have the New York Jets at 15. Ouch. 16 is the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, dear Lord. 17 is the Baltimore Ravens. Oh, have mercy. It's not pretty, Sig. And I think the other part for the Dolphins, it's not only the part of getting this offense off schedule, but when you focus your entire, and I'm not saying that what McDaniel has done is wrong. It's not wrong to get the ball in the hands of your best playmakers. But also, can we also throw this out here to where if you whittle an offense down to one player, maybe two players, the math and the arithmetic gets a lot easier in the sense of we take him away. What are you going to do to counterpunch? So I think that also the secret sauce for Miami is also we need to get Jalen Waddle more involved in this offense. Tyreek Hill has been a fantastic story. He's been arguably the Cooper Kupp of this year, to where he's matchup proof. The volume's always there. He's fantastic. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But we also need to understand that this offense was extremely good last year, and Jalen Waddle was a larger part of this offense. So the ability to counterpunch and also deal with what the defense is giving you. Okay, if you're going to take away Tyreek Hill, how do we overcome that? Do we feed the ball to Jalen Waddle? Do we have another pass catcher that can step up? Are we going to use the run game or our running backs in the passing game? And some of that you've seen with Raheem Mostert in the passing game. Waddle's been banged up, but not enough to where if somebody were to say, okay, we can't fully erase Tyreek Hill, but we can mute him. If he doesn't go for 150 and burn us, if we leave him to 70 receiving yards and he catches 8 balls, he doesn't score, so what? Can you counterpunch with the other parts or pieces of this offense well enough if we take Tyreek Hill away? And I think that's a bigger part of not only is the fragility of this offense versus good defense. That's absolutely true. And we've seen that in the fantasy output. But also this offense has to change and include and make Jalen Waddle and the other secondary pieces of this offense more of a factor.
Yeah, we saw that earlier this year at times. But you bring up some really good points. It's reminiscent almost of the Titans and Derrick Henry, right? It's like you can take this away, you're going to really make this offense uncomfortable. And you mentioned Jalen Waddle, and back into your earlier point, Jalen Waddle has been on and off the injury report. Left last week's game with a knee. Now has a week off, but he might be one of those players who's not healthy at all. And he's gutting it out every week, and he's just not going to get to 100% or even close to 100%.
Because there was also rumblings that he was dealing with a back issue. I saw various beat reporters like at least
back spasms a couple weeks ago,
kind of mention that in other tweets, like not like posted up as like the main part, but it like you could see it in the tea leaves. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but I definitely could see a case where to tie a couple of things together from the show. Okay. If you have Tyreek Hill, unless you're just stacked at running back, go right now and offer him for Jonathan Taylor. Go into your league, your redraft league, and just offer Tyreek Hill for Jonathan Taylor.
And you should be able to get JT plus, to be honest. You should be able to get JT and something else on top.
Sure. JT and a throw-in. Yeah. JT and Jake Ferguson or whatever. Yeah. But my point is, this is a good example of doing these equivalencies where I always want to be proven wrong. And boy, do I get a lot of opportunities to be proven wrong.
Same.
Enjoy it. But Tyreek Hill, like in your mind's eye, when you think of Tua, when you think of this offense against the Jets, Dallas, and Baltimore, it does not sound like a Tyreek Hill bonanza week. Now the answer, the counterpunch, Mike McDaniel stroking his chin right now, waiting to answer you, Derek, and saying it's Devin Achane. That's the answer.
That's true. That's true.
The answer. So we'll see. And that brings up to me a larger point that the running back cavalry is coming. And you might say, this is great, telling me try to trade for Jonathan Taylor or whoever. But I can't do that. I'll tell you who you might be able to trade for, especially if their team is slipping. And you want to look at teams' records. You want to get a context of where they are at. They might be in a position where they feel like they have to win out to make the playoffs. Because Jonathan Taylor, remember, his bye is coming up next week. That's the time to trade for him. Here's some players who may or may not be able to help their teams this week. Devin Achane, we just talked about. James Conner may or may not be back. Khalil Herbert, who was looking really good before he got hurt.
Yep.
Have I mentioned that the Bears offense had a 3-touchdown running back game with Tyson Bagent at quarterback? So these are potentially obtainable running backs. And I would say in the case of all three and their different levels, overpay for them. What does that mean? Just pay more than because any one of these guys, here's from what you told me, Derek, in the classic running back one, the classic fantasy football rankings, a running back one is someone in the top 12 running backs, right? I mean, it doesn't really mean anything because if so many running backs are struggling, that really quote unquote running back one production, let's say 17 points a game in PPR leagues or something like that. Well, now if you introduce that cut line, well, geez, there might only be 4 or 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, agreed. If you look at this as far as tiers, that math changes very quickly.
Yes. And what that tells me is it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch for Devin Achane to be a top 3 running back. He already was. It's not a stretch for James Conner to be a top 8. He already was top 6, top 8, based on where he would fall now. And that's without Kyler Murray and Khalil Herbert. It's not a stretch for Khalil Herbert to be a top 12 running back if he just takes over the backfield. Now, Dante Foreman might have given them enough to think about while he was out, and that's what always can happen with injuries. But remember, again, this offense with Justin Fields can be very explosive. So these running backs coming off of injured reserve, I think, is potentially a good vein of gold to tap. Because, again, I think what people might not be factoring into the trade value of these running backs is just how brutal it is. So on that note of just how brutal it is, anybody else you want to, this is like a theme that I didn't plan on us having, like, running back indigestion. Anybody else you like, or anybody else that you feel like, if you've been looking at your teams, we're doing the primer. I want to talk about the primer, that every time you do the primer, you appreciate this running back more. Who do you want to put the spotlight on?
So you talked about absence making the heart grow fonder. Let's also bring up another running back that's on bye. So if somebody, and he's not been producing at high levels, but the one running back that I feel like is not getting his flowers and the playoff schedule that it sits in front of him, Isiah Pacheco, Sig,
Ooh.
is a monster buy low right now. The production is waxed and waned. People are kind of like, the Kansas City offense, what's he going to do? He's on bye this week. He's not helping anybody catch a W. When they come out of the bye, okay, yes, he gets Philly in week 11. After that, his schedule opens up massively. So after Philly, they get the Raiders, they get the Packers. Stop me, Sig, when I get to a rushing defense that you're scared about. Then they get the Buffalo Bills. Then they get the Patriots. Okay, fine, whatever. Then they get the Raiders again in week 16 and the Cincinnati Bengals in week 17. You can run on every single one of those teams outside of possibly the Patriots. So we're talking about the players that you could trade for and trade for a little bit easier than a lot of people would think. Pacheco has to be at near or the top of that list.
I love it because we already know this offense produced a league-winning running back last year in Jerick McKinnon. Now, the secret, if you rearrange the letters, take here might be trade for Jerick McKinnon or pick up Jerick McKinnon, right? Because they're just going to do the same thing again. And everybody has already seen enough Jerick McKinnon lines that he's out there, right? So maybe pick up Jerick McKinnon, cost you nothing, or get him as a throw-in in a trade. But Isiah Pacheco is that guy that is a bigger part of the offense than he was last year, a bigger part of the passing game, or continuing to be a big part of the passing game like he was at the end of the year last year. And I'll say this, there is a clever take somewhere in the Kansas City offense that you can profit from. It might be Rashee Rice. It might be coming out of the bye. He's going to be ready to be a primary receiver in a way that they're not going to have. It might be, hey, because Travis Kelce had a dud going into the bye, trade for him. Because when the bullets start flying and they have to win games to get home field, Mahomes is just going to look for Kelce. It might be Patrick Mahomes actually hasn't played up to Patrick Mahomes' typical levels, and the lack of receiving options, they didn't do anything at the trade deadline, et cetera, is starting to catch up to the offense a little bit. And maybe it's just going to continue to be, it's not just that they're winning games easily. Maybe even the fact that they have a good defense now is going to be a limiting factor for this offense. And then maybe it's time to sell Patrick Mahomes. Honestly,
maybe it's time to just run the damn ball and lean on your defense.
Yeah, trade Patrick Mahomes for Jared Goff and something that can really help your team or something like that.
I feel so old just saying that. I just made a sentence about establishing the run on a show. I don't even know how to feel about myself right now, Sig.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. It's well because there still is because it's December. No. But that's a part of the Isiah Pacheco take. It's the time of the year that teams establish the run. And you have to be able to establish the run. This could be a James Cook or a Leonard Fournette even take, you know. But then again, Buffalo's not showing us that they want to establish the run. Kansas City, though, you mentioned, I want to go back real quickly because we're talking a lot about schedules. I mentioned Jared Goff not by accident. Jared Goff plays one more outdoor game after this week.
Oh,
one. That's it. Jared Goff is going to be at Chicago, Green Bay at home, at New Orleans, at Chicago. There's your outdoor game. Denver at home, at Minnesota, at Dallas.
Wow.
Detroit's offense, everybody. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is also a buy high, by the way.
Agreed.
I think Jahmyr Gibbs is also somebody like I would pay a lot for him. I would probably trade Tyreek Hill for Jahmyr Gibbs and Stephon. No, it's not Stephon Diggs. Someone's going to do that. But another T Higgins. That's an interesting buy low right now.
Yeah,
too.
He is because he's finally seems like he's healthy.
And Jamar Chase has that back issue. So again, I think that you bring up a really good point. It's not going to help us except to maybe entertain possibilities because usually after the season we find out oh yeah, this guy was playing with something since week 6 that he had to have operated on, but he wasn't on the injury report. That could be Jamar Chase in his back.
That's
after
fair.
he said I'm alive. So I think that's an important schedule to point out. And we're looking at offenses that could just continue to keep the pie big enough that as you go through the ups and downs, because boy, hasn't that been fantasy football this year? New Orleans, after their bye this week, at Atlanta, home against Detroit, home against Carolina, home against the Giants, at the Rams. They play one outdoor game, Derek, at Tampa. That's good for offenses. Taysom Hill, league winner. I want to live in that world. want to live in
a lot of zone coverage too. So the deeper part of that too, as well as continue to flex Rashid Shaheed, because the two boxes you have to check are the team, is the team bad versus deep passing? Bing. Is the team going to run a lot of zone coverage? Bing. Okay, then it's probably a Rashid Shaheed week. And if the spike hits, and we've seen it, it's hit enough parts of this season to where he can be the flex guy that brings you over the finish line for that week.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love Rashid Shaheed. And I think that Derek Carr is getting more confident. I think this Saints team down here is. You still have the Saints in your heart, right? You still have Florida.
Oh, of course I do. I still think they're going to easily win the South.
Sig. They should. If they don't, there's something wrong.
I mean, they're 5-4 right now. The defense is humming. If we can get Alontae Taylor a little more comfortable as a nickel corner this year, which I still lament. I know Paulson's playing so freaking good. I just lament because I feel like Alontae was one of those guys that did not get talked about enough last year to where he just absolutely, because a bigger part of this, rookie corners don't usually just hit the ground running in the NFL. Like those are usually the guys for DFS purposes or in fantasy that we kind of pick on. It's when the rookies hit the rookie wall or they struggle at the gate, i.e. Emmanuel Forbes. Like guys like that's a continual story. So I think a brighter light needs to be shined on when these guys come to the NFL and they look like they belong, like they've been there forever. Alontae did that last year. Sauce did it in his rookie season. And for everybody out there, this year's guy, Joey Porter Jr., is playing out of his mind this year.
Yeah.
So I had to lean into some Steelers love for you there, Sig.
Thanks. Well, Christian Gonzalez before he got hurt too. Christian Gonzalez,
yes, he was playing amazing.
He contained Tyreek Hill in like week 2.
Yes,
it's like, I mean, anyway, I love talking about cornerbacks, IDP, DFS matchups, and just understanding all the context. And absolutely, this giving some love to the Saints. I don't know why, but I feel like I need to mention also that I feel certain, Derek, that no city loves a player more. There's maybe cities that love a player the same amount. No city loves a player more than New Orleans loves Cam Jordan.
Agreed.
That's
agreed.
New Orleans rides or dies with that guy.
That man could run for mayor. He could run for governor. He could do whatever he wants to. And honestly, he has been amazing. And he's still amazing.
He better be a Hall of Famer.
He better be a Hall of Famer. They better induct that man because it's a total package, Sig. He's been so damn good for so long. He's been great with the media. He's been great in the community. Like name a part or piece where Cam Jordan has not been amazing, and he's not proved like he's been awesome. Yes, true.
That's the thing. Every week, I think what people and I want people like send me stuff on Twitter or something if there are other players that because it's your community. But living in New Orleans, every week he is out there. Every single week. I did see that Jameis Winston had 20 breast cancer survivors as his guests and brought them down on the field, hung out with them and everything.
I missed that. That's awesome.
Which is cool because it wasn't just like, here's some tickets courtesy of Mr. Winston. Like he actually, like they were his guests at the game. But Cam Jordan is out there every single week. And he's not just like showing up and shaking hands. Like he goes to the class and hangs out with the kids and they climb all over him and whatever. I mean, he belongs to this community and it's a beautiful thing.
Well, we didn't even talk about Demario Davis too, and everything that he's also dealt with off the field, on the field, his personal life and how he has been. You want to talk about players that are a shining example. Like when we talk about NFL players and people propping them up as, and I'm not saying that's a perfect science, but people propping them up as examples or role models. Demario Davis should be in that conversation. He's an amazing human.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Great story. Now I want to turn to the primer. What you do every week, partially because it gives me a chance to say the name Mike Tagliere, a more beautiful soul you will probably never encounter in your life. I'll get a little verklempt talking about Mike. That was his baby. That was his baby. And what it really showed is that Mike he did more work than anybody, and he loved it. And he loved every second of it. And you got to take that over. I guess and Fantasy Pros, again, this is appointment reading. So I just want to tee it up by asking you about the process of the primer. And you can take this down to a micro specific level if you want, but just tell me about the process and then how that gives you the little pearls or the aha moments, the epiphanies that become the takes, like how it's what's the process when you have to go over with that jeweler's eye everything and boil it down to stuff that people can use.
It's oh man, how the sausage is made. On a weekly basis, I think from a top-down perspective, I start looking at pace and play volume of offenses and trying to get a sense of what the game environments look like. And then from there, it all starts with the passing attack. So once I write up, whenever I go to write up quarterbacks for every single game, I look at how does this offense succeed and how does it fail this week? So is that versus pressure? Is that via play action? Is that deep passing? Is it none of the above? And whenever I look at those avenues for success or failure, or at least the caveats of if they struggle, or is this quarterback going to be under pressure? Okay, well, what does that branch off into? Okay, well, if it's succeeding in play action, okay, when they use play action, who do they go with? When they go deep, who do they throw to? When the quarterback is under duress, who does he look for? Same thing with coverage matchups. Is it man? Is it zone? What happens with that? Who do they go to? Who do they look for? And that top-down approach kind of gives me a good idea about what the offense looks like, as well as is this a run funnel defense or is it a pass funnel defense? And how is that going to impact, with the assumption of not just rational coaching, but from a top-down view of, okay, this is where a team struggles to defend and where an offense should attack. Now, that doesn't always follow suit. And, this is a game about a game, but still a game played by other humans. So not all of these nuggets are going to come to fruition.
Right.
Not all of these things are going to happen.
And that's probabilities here.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's where it comes down with this is still a game about a game that's played by other humans. So as much as we try to prognosticate all these things, we're not going to ever be 100% on a weekly basis. We're never going to be, I mean, heck, if you're shooting 50 to 60%, you're doing pretty damn good. In baseball terms, you'd be in a Hall of Famer. You'd be the best that ever played.
Right.
But so looking at that, that's where I start the process. And then we kind of go into the nitty gritty of players, usage. The farther we get into the season, Sig, then I'll look at micro trends of I'll look at not the full season, because that's the other thing. Like we've talked about with these teams, not only looking back, but looking forward. It's what have these teams done in the last few weeks? So you have 9 weeks of an NFL season. Well, the same things that you were talking about in week 4 might not be true in week 9.
Yes. Yes.
The teams change.
It all continues to change. We never figure it out.
Constantly evolving, constantly changing equation. X does not equal 2 week 2 to week 7. It's how it goes. So not only am I looking at what teams have done the entirety, it's what have they done in the last 4 to 5 weeks in recency and marrying all those things together. And it's a shit ton of work, man. I mean, look, shout out again, Mike Tags.
Yeah.
That man was people, and I've said it in various spots, but people don't realize how much not only his work has impacted the fantasy community, but how much his work and his friendship impacted me as not only a content creator, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. There have been times where I've been extremely low in this entire journey of going from doing this as a part-time hobby to doing this as a full-time profession. And if it wasn't for Tags, I would have given up. There were multiple times where 2 a.m. conversations via DMs and texts and shit where I would have just quit and I wouldn't even be here. And when I first went to Fantasy Pros and I got hired by Fantasy Pros to where, the idea was broached to me about taking over the primer. And I legit told them no 2 times. I was like, I had reservations about doing it and holding it up to the same standard as that Mike built, as well as just taking over something like that, and feeling like I was giving it enough reverence. And so it's something I still continue to, I don't want to say struggle with, but continue to weigh in my mind's eye about like, am I doing this to the fullest that it can be done? And I just want to continue to try to answer my own question with a yes on a weekly basis, man. And a lot of times that's led to, I think, probably like half of the weeks of the NFL season, maybe more. I mean, the bedtime on a Wednesday night, so the primer comes out Thursday early AM, has been 5 a.m. Some nights it's been no sleep. And you just power through. But to be honest, like it matters. And it matters to me that the product is where it needs to be, both for myself, what I think that the levels should be done, as well as being respectful to what Tag's built. And that matters a lot to me. So sleep be damned, man.
Yeah, I love it. And sorry, Joe. But some things we have to speak in words that really describe what is real, and the proverbial big shoes to fill, right? I mean, that's still called the primer, but I promise you, the fact that you're asking yourself, am I doing something up to the standard, means you probably are. But to go back over what you said, which I think is great, is it really emphasizes the matchup portion, right? The chemical reaction. The chemical, like, you can understand what you have over here in this bottle, and you can understand what you have over here in this bottle, but what happens when you put those two things together? And that's the part that, because like you said, it's human beings, it's inherently unpredictable. And you can put the same two things together, but first of all, like you said, hey, it's not the same thing. It's what they might have played in week 4, they're play this week, different players, different things have happened. Rookies aren't rookies anymore, whatever. And you can't count on it going the same way, and so on. And what I really love about what you laid out there, other than, of course, all the great words of respect for Mike, and like you said, you got a chance to like go into the workshop and say, wow, this is what he was doing every week. No, I mean, only Mike could do that with grace and a smile on his face. But it leads back to humility. The more you study this, and it's great to take Meisters and the whole fantasy football industrial complex. I mean, there are lots of ways to get ahead, and all the people that are finding all these other ways to get ahead, go for it. I do it my way, and thankfully it's worked out, and the check's still clear and things like that. But the more you spend trying to prognosticate this, I use that term fake fortune teller a lot. We're fake fortune tellers pretending we can tell the future.
We're all fantasy weathermen. That's something that gets thrown out there.
Yeah, and it's okay. Like and sometimes the more we study it, the more we want to just say, like, really, I mean, you'd go with what you think. This is what I think, but I know better than to think that I have certainty or confidence that I'm going to be right, because that's just how it is. Okay, we kind of spilled over into off the rails anyway, but we're always off the rails.
I mean, come on. Were you expecting anything different with the two of us on this show, Sig?
Hopefully, maybe there'll come a time when I don't have to even make fantasy football content, and I can really do on the couch with all y'all, old man, and we don't talk about football at all, but still during the season,
that would be great, man.
So, but I got to ask you about this. Anthony M says, a mellow D-bro, all caps, by the way, is a rare sighting. Varieties of spice of life. All right.
Love it.
So if a mellow D-bro is rare, what's the default D-bro?
I think that the default is a lot of the Southern twang and charm and things kicked up to 11. I don't know if it's just a natural thing for me, but just being, because I think a lot of people look at not my own air persona, because I'm the same person, this, Sig. We talk. I'm the same damn person off air. Like, we turn the cameras on, the mics on. I'm the same person then versus when I am on a show.
Right.
I think it's honestly just, I'm very passionate about the things that I do. And with that comes a lot of energy. And I think a lot of times that gets misconstrued as being cocky, being arrogant, things like that. It's not. It's trust me, I get a lot of stuff wrong. That happens on a weekly basis. Yeah. And that's fine. But for me, I think the median is, I'm always going to be loud. I'm always going to be energetic, and I'm always going to be passionate about stuff. So the mellow times, they come and they go. And the salty times are also there as well. especially middle of the season. I mean, when we're all tired and
Oh yeah.
beleaguered at this point of the season, Sig. But I think the median is somewhere just me being loud as hell on a weekly basis, and that's, I guess, people have come to expect that now.
Isn't it great that they love us, that they accept us as for who we are, our people?
Yep.
It's really, because I always say that not only do we get paid to do something that is fun to do, but we get a big psychological need met when people validate us and say, like, you're okay. I
Well,
like
because
you the way you
imposter
are.
syndrome is real too here.
It
I mean,
should be.
people
Everybody
don't
should have
talk about
imposter
it,
syndrome.
but it is absolutely real, and it is something like I struggle with still on a daily basis. It does
in
not
all
matter
aspects and circles of my life. I like to say, Derek,
matter.
I like to say, I'm not a human, but I've spent a long time studying them so I can fit in with them.
It's true. There's so much real in that. Whew.
Yeah.
We could chew on that for a while, Sig, but it's real though, man. Like, people think that, like, you get to a certain follower count or whatever else, or you get clout, or you get a full-time job in this industry, and all of a sudden, like, what, you think you have it all solved? If you do, kudos to you. But no, for me, there comes even bigger questions. Like, I feel like the imposter syndrome gets kicked up to 11, where I'm constantly like, am I doing enough work? Did I miss an edge? Did I see this? Did I not? And all those other kind of things also get kicked up in that. And so, to me, I've always thrown this out there. It's like, the point of doing all of this, Sig, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but the point of doing all of this, once I get to the point, or if I were to ever get to the point where I quit pushing the boundaries of how much stuff I'm going to look at, or I quit trying to get better, or I think I have all this figured out, I'm either lying to myself or I'm totally full of it. Like, I need to look in the mirror at that point and say, okay, you need to take it down a notch, because you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, again, what you said, what you laid out so well when I asked you about the primer, is all the work you do leads you back to being reminded how difficult it is to predict this stuff on a week-to-week basis. But because you care, then it's going to continue to be good. And I love that you mentioned the idea that you're passionate and energetic. And I think passion creates energy. Passion opens up the outlets, the tunnels of energy to come through you. It fills you right back up when you're passionate about something, but you're also fun and playful. You're serious about the work that you do, but as a person, you're still playful about it, because it's fantasy football. Okay, really briefly, because we're almost up against the hour. So just like quick answer. This is real on couch stuff. Okay. Other than being on the couch here with me, what else makes you mellow?
Oh, I'd say music. Listening to music in all different iterations. It's always something it's binding my life together. I think people have their passions. But I've thrown this a million times out there. All these books behind me, I'm such a fraud. I'm not a reader. My wife, that's all of her stuff. Music is my passion. Music is my poetry. So it's the one thing that I feel like, when life is great, it makes it better. When life is terrible, it kind of evens you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Music it's a saving grace. It's the language of the soul. I live in New Orleans. You live here in Louisiana. It isn't even just about New Orleans either. Like, the
Good
Cajun
food, good
music,
music.
Zydeco, just so much. Okay, what makes you salty?
I think, honestly, the social media persona and the negativity that people feel they can say whatever they want to with a keyboard in front of them these days, Sig. I feel like that's even more prevalent than it was 10 years ago. So, not to flame all of social media, but I also feel like, if people took the approach with social media and said the things that they would say to somebody, and only the things that they would say to somebody to their face, physically, like, to their face, we would have much different interactions with people on social media platforms.
Yeah. I mean, oh, geez, we could do a lot on that, but we definitely want to be reminded of each other's humanity when possible.
Agreed.
And that's become more difficult, in partially because everyone's life is more difficult and everyone's been through trauma. And like you and I were talking about before the show, sometimes we just trooper on instead of dealing with how we're really feeling. But we try to do that when we're here on the couch, at least for this hour. We love spending time with you. We love spending time with wonderful people like Debro, the Primer, Fantasy Pros. Get to know it, folks. We love bringing you the best always because you are so